Rebecca Martinez had been visiting the same shooting range for 3 years, every Tuesday and Thursday like clockwork. At 34, she worked as a dental hygienist at a small practice downtown, lived alone in a modest apartment with her rescue dog Max, and found solace in the precision required for target shooting. The other regulars barely noticed her. A quiet woman in worn jeans and a faded baseball cap, methodically loading magazines and taking careful aim at paper targets 50 yards away. The Riverside shooting range attracted all types. There were the weekend warriors who showed up with expensive gear and loud voices, the competitive shooters who treated every session like Olympic training, and the casual hobbyists who just wanted to blow off steam after work. Rebecca fell into none of these categories. She was consistent, respectful, and kept to herself. The range staff knew her by name, but only because she'd been coming for so long. She always paid her fees without complaint, followed every safety protocol to the letter, and cleaned up after herself. What nobody knew was that Rebecca carried more than just the weight of her daily routine. Beneath her right sleeve, hidden by careful clothing choices and long sleeves even in summer, was a tattoo that told a story she'd never shared with anyone at the range. It was a detailed piece of artwork that had taken multiple sessions to complete, each line and shade holding significance that went far beyond mere decoration. The tattoo was a reminder of a life she'd left behind, a chapter closed but never forgotten. On this particular Thursday afternoon, Rebecca noticed the range was busier than usual. A group of men in matching polo shirts had commandeered 3 lanes on the far end, their conversation carrying over the usual sounds of gunfire and brass hitting concrete. She paid them little attention, focusing instead on her routine. Load the magazine, check the chamber, align the sights, breathe, squeeze. The familiar ritual helped quiet her mind after long days dealing with difficult patients and insurance paperwork. The autumn air was crisp as she stepped outside during a break, rolling up her sleeves slightly to enjoy the cool breeze. She'd been shooting for 2 hours and felt the familiar satisfaction that came with consistent groupings on the target. Her shoulder-length dark hair caught the late afternoon sun as she checked her phone for messages. Max would be waiting at home, probably stationed by the window watching for her return. As she prepared to head back inside for her final session, Rebecca noticed one of the men from the group standing near the entrance, apparently waiting for something. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with the kind of bearing that suggested military background. His polo shirt was slightly different from the others. It had additional patches and insignia that she couldn't quite make out from her distance. When their eyes met briefly, she offered a polite nod before heading back to her lane, unaware that this simple interaction would change everything. Commander James Mitchell had been running training exercises with his team all week. As a Navy SEAL instructor, He was accustomed to evaluating people quickly and accurately. The woman he'd just passed seemed unremarkable at first glance, another civilian shooter enjoying a hobby. But something about her stance, her grip, the way she moved with purpose rather than just going through motions, suggested more than casual interest in marksmanship. The moment that would alter both their lives was still minutes away, hidden like Rebecca's tattoo beneath the surface of an ordinary Thursday afternoon at the range. Rebecca returned to her lane and began her final round of shooting. The familiar weight of her pistol felt comfortable in her hands as she loaded a fresh magazine. She'd been shooting the same model for years, a reliable weapon that had never failed her. The repetitive motion of drawing, aiming, and firing helped her process the stresses of her day job, where she dealt with anxious patients and demanding dentists. Her accuracy had improved significantly over the 3 years she'd been coming to Riverside. What started as a way to feel safer as a single woman living alone had evolved into something deeper, a meditation of sorts, a place where her mind could focus entirely on the present moment. The precision required pushed away thoughts of past and future, leaving only the immediate task of placing rounds exactly where she intended. As she fired her final magazine, Rebecca became aware that the conversation from the group of men had quieted. She glanced over and noticed several of them watching her shooting, though they quickly looked away when she turned her head. She'd experienced this before. Some men at the range seemed surprised to see a woman shooting with consistent accuracy, especially one who didn't fit their preconceptions about female shooters. The temperature inside the range had risen during the afternoon, and Rebecca felt warm despite the building's ventilation system. Without thinking, she rolled up her right sleeve to just above her elbow, revealing the bottom portion of her tattoo. The ink was still vibrant despite being several years old, the artist having done exceptional work that had aged well. The visible portion showed part of an eagle's wing and some scroll work, though the full design remained hidden. Commander Mitchell had been observing various shooters throughout the afternoon, partly out of professional habit and partly out of curiosity. When he noticed the woman in lane 7 roll up her sleeve, his attention sharpened. What he could see of the tattoo was familiar, very familiar. The style, the specific details, the way certain elements were positioned all suggested something he'd seen before in very specific circumstances. He moved closer, trying to get a better look without being obvious about it. The woman was focused on her shooting, unaware of his scrutiny. From his new position, he could see more of the tattoo's details, and what he saw made his blood run cold. The eagle wing was part of a larger design that he recognized immediately, because he'd seen it in classified briefings and operational reports. It wasn't just any military tattoo, it was something specific, something that shouldn't exist on a civilian. Rebecca finished her session and began packing her equipment. She'd brought her own case, cleaning supplies and safety gear, all organized with military precision that she'd maintained even years after leaving that life behind. As she prepared to leave, she noticed the tall man from the group approaching her lane. His expression was serious, almost intense, and she felt a familiar wariness rise in her chest. When Commander Mitchell spoke, his voice carried the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed, but also uncertainty about what he was seeing. The question he asked would force Rebecca to confront a past she'd worked hard to leave behind, and set in motion events that would eventually lead to a reckoning she'd never expected. "Excuse me," Commander Mitchell said, his voice carefully controlled. "I couldn't help but notice your tattoo. Where did you get that ink done?" Rebecca's hand instinctively moved to her sleeve, pulling it down to cover the exposed portion of her tattoo. Her expression remained neutral, but her posture shifted slightly, subtle changes that Mitchell's trained eye immediately recognized as defensive positioning. She'd been asked about her tattoo before, but never by someone who looked at it with such intensity. "It's from a shop downtown," she replied evenly. "Is there something you need?" Mitchell studied her face, nodding the way she avoided giving specific details while maintaining steady eye contact. In his experience, people who were truly innocent about military matters either showed curiosity about why he was asking or gave elaborate explanations about their tattoo's meaning. This woman was doing neither. She was deflecting professionally, and that told him more than any answer she might have given. "I'm Commander Mitchell, Navy SEALs," he said, watching her reaction carefully. "I've seen that particular design before, and I'm curious about where you might have encountered it." Rebecca's expression didn't change, but Mitchell caught the slightest tightening around her eyes. She finished packing her equipment with deliberate calm, taking her time to zip up her case and collect her safety gear. When she finally looked at him again, her voice carried a coolness that hadn't been there before. "I'm not sure what you're implying, Commander, but I'm just here to shoot paper targets. I don't know anything about military designs or whatever you think you saw." The denial was smooth, practiced, but Mitchell had interrogated enough people to recognize when someone was giving him a prepared response. Moreover, the way she pronounced his rank, with proper military cadence despite claiming to be a civilian, suggested familiarity with military protocol that most people wouldn't possess. "Ma'am, I'm not trying to cause trouble," Mitchell said, modulating his tone to sound less confrontational. "It's just that the tattoo you're wearing contains elements that are typically associated with classified operations. If you're former military, there's nothing wrong with that, but I need to understand how you came to have that particular imagery." Rebecca shouldered her equipment bag and met his gaze directly. For a moment, Mitchell saw something flicker in her eyes, not fear, but calculation. She was weighing her options, deciding how much to reveal or how much to continue denying. The silence stretched between them while other shooters continued their sessions, oblivious to the tense conversation happening at Lane 7. "I think there's been a misunderstanding," Rebecca finally said. "I'm a dental hygienist. I clean teeth for a living. Whatever you think you see in my tattoo, you're mistaken." She turned to leave, but Mitchell stepped slightly to block her path. It wasn't aggressive, but it was clear he wasn't finished with the conversation. Rebecca stopped and looked at him with an expression that was becoming less friendly and more guarded. "Commander, I've answered your question. I'd appreciate it if you'd let me leave now." Mitchell realized he was walking a fine line. If he was wrong about what he'd seen, he was harassing a civilian. But if he was right, then this woman possessed information or experience that could have serious implications for national security. He made a decision that would change both their lives. "I saw the trident," he said quietly. "Bottom right corner of the design. That's not something you get from a random tattoo shop." Rebecca's careful composure cracked for just an instant. The mention of the trident, the distinctive symbol of Navy SEALs, hit her like a physical blow. She'd been so careful for so long, avoiding situations where her tattoo might be seen by anyone who would recognize its significance. The fact that this man had identified the most protected element of her ink meant her carefully constructed civilian life was about to collapse. "I don't know what you're talking about," she said, but her voice lacked the conviction it had carried moments earlier. Mitchell saw the crack in her armor and pressed forward, though he kept his voice gentle. "The trident is surrounded by specific operational markers, unit designations, mission dates, classification symbols. Those aren't decorative elements, ma'am. They're documentation. And they're not supposed to exist on someone who claims to be a civilian." Rebecca closed her eyes for a moment, then opened them with an expression of resignation mixed with something that might have been relief. The weight of maintaining her cover story for 3 years had been heavier than she'd admitted to herself. Part of her was exhausted from pretending to be someone she wasn't, even if that pretense had been necessary for her survival. "Not here," she said quietly. "If we're going to have this conversation, it can't be here." Mitchell nodded, understanding that whatever story she was about to tell him required privacy. He gestured toward the range's small conference room, which was empty at this time of day. As they walked, he noticed that Rebecca moved with the efficient grace of someone who'd been trained to move silently and purposefully. Her civilian disguise was good, but now that he knew what to look for, the signs of military training were unmistakable. The conference room was stark and functional, with a small table and several chairs. Rebecca sat down and rolled up her sleeve completely, revealing the full extent of her tattoo for the first time in years. Mitchell's expression grew grave as he took in the complete design. What he saw confirmed his worst fears and raised questions that would require careful handling. The tattoo was a detailed record of classified operations, presented in a form that looked like decorative artwork, but was actually a sophisticated intelligence document. Anyone who understood the symbology could read it like a mission report. The implications were staggering, and Mitchell realized he was looking at either the most elaborate security breach in naval history or something even more complex. "My name is Rebecca Martinez," she said, her voice steady now that the pretense was over. "But that's not the name I was born with, and I'm not a dental hygienist." Mitchell sat down across from her, his mind racing through protocols and procedures. Whatever this woman was about to tell him, it was going to complicate his life in ways he couldn't yet imagine. But as he looked at the tattoo again, he realized that the complexity was just beginning. The truth, when it came, would be more dangerous than either of them had anticipated. Rebecca took a deep breath and began to speak, her voice carrying the weight of secrets she'd carried alone for too long. "8 years ago, I was Lieutenant Sarah Chen, Naval Intelligence. I was embedded with SEAL Team 6 for a classified operation in Afghanistan. The mission was designated Operation Nightfall, and according to official records, I died during that operation." Mitchell's expression hardened as he processed what she was telling him. A dead intelligence officer sitting across from him, alive and well, with classified information tattooed on her skin. The implications were staggering, and he felt the familiar weight of a situation that was spiraling beyond his control. "The tattoo," Rebecca continued, "was supposed to be my insurance policy. If something happened to me, if I was captured or killed, the intelligence embedded in the design would survive. It contains mission parameters, contact codes, and evidence of what really happened during Nightfall. But I never expected to survive to worry about it." She paused, looking at her hands. "The operation went wrong. We were betrayed by someone high up in the command structure. My team was ambushed and I was the only survivor. But I couldn't come forward because I didn't know who had sold us out. Going through official channels would have been suicide." Mitchell leaned forward, his voice low and intense. "Are you telling me that there's a mole in naval intelligence who's been operating for 8 years? I'm telling you that someone with access to classified SEAL operations sold out my team for money. 12 good soldiers died because of that betrayal, and I've been hiding ever since, trying to stay alive long enough to figure out who was responsible." The weight of her words settled over the room like a physical presence. Mitchell realized he was looking at a woman who had sacrificed everything, her identity, her career, her life, to survive long enough to seek justice for her fallen teammates. The tattoo wasn't just a security breach. It was a memorial and a weapon. Why didn't you contact naval intelligence through back channels? Mitchell asked. There are protocols for this kind of situation. Rebecca's laugh was bitter. Because I tried that. 6 months after the operation, I made contact with someone I thought I could trust. Within a week, there was an attempt on my life. That's when I knew the corruption went deeper than I'd imagined. Mitchell studied her face, looking for signs of deception, but found only the exhaustion of someone who had been running for too long. Her story was outrageous, but the details in her tattoo were too specific to be fabricated. More importantly, her operational knowledge was too precise for someone who had merely heard about classified missions. So you became Rebecca Martinez, dental hygienist, and hoped no one would ever connect you to Lieutenant Chen. I became someone forgettable, she corrected. Someone who could hide in plain sight while I investigated. I've been tracking financial records, following paper trails, trying to identify who had access to our mission parameters. It's taken me 8 years, but I'm close. I know who sold us out. Mitchell felt a chill run down his spine. Who? Rebecca met his eyes, and in them he saw the cold determination of someone who had sacrificed everything for justice. Admiral Harrison Blackwood. He's currently Deputy Director of Naval Intelligence, and he's been selling classified information to foreign interests for over a decade. Operation Nightfall was just one of many betrayals. The name hit Mitchell like a physical blow. Admiral Blackwood was one of the most respected figures in naval intelligence, a man who had been instrumental in shaping SEAL operations for the past 15 years. The accusation seemed impossible, but as Mitchell looked at the evidence literally written on Rebecca's skin, he began to understand the scope of what she was telling him. You're accusing a flag officer of treason, he said quietly. I'm not accusing him, Rebecca replied. I'm stating a fact, and now that you know, you're in as much danger as I am. Mitchell realized that his life had just changed irrevocably. He was now part of a conspiracy that reached the highest levels of naval intelligence, and there was no going back. The question was whether he would help Rebecca expose the truth or try to distance himself from what she was telling him. Looking at her tattoo again, seeing the names and dates of operations he recognized, Mitchell made his decision. What do you need me to do? Rebecca smiled for the first time since their conversation began. I need you to help me prove it, and then I need you to help me make sure Admiral Blackwood pays for what he did to my team. The alliance formed in that moment would either bring justice to 12 dead soldiers or get them both killed. But for the first time in 8 years, Rebecca Martinez no longer felt like she was fighting alone. Over the next hour, Rebecca laid out the evidence she'd gathered over 8 years of careful investigation. She produced a tablet from her bag, showing Mitchell financial records, communication intercepts, and operational timelines that painted a damning picture of systematic betrayal at the highest levels of naval intelligence. Blackwood has been selling information to a consortium of foreign intelligence services, she explained, scrolling through bank records. He's been careful to make it look like the leaks were coming from lower-level personnel, but the pattern is clear once you know what to look for. Mitchell studied the documents, his military training allowing him to quickly assess the credibility of the evidence. What he saw was comprehensive and devastating. Rebecca had built a case that would hold up in any court, but the challenge was presenting it through channels that Blackwood couldn't influence or suppress. "How did you access these records?" Mitchell asked. "I maintained some of my intelligence contacts from before the operation," Rebecca replied. "People who believed I was dead but were willing to help when I reached out. It's taken years to piece together, but the evidence is solid." Mitchell realized that Rebecca had been running a sophisticated intelligence operation while maintaining her civilian cover. The complexity of what she'd accomplished was staggering, and it spoke to both her skill and her dedication to her fallen teammates. "The problem," Rebecca continued, "is that Blackwood has enough influence to bury this evidence if it comes through normal channels. He's been preparing for the possibility of exposure for years. We need to approach this differently." "What do you have in mind?" Rebecca pulled up another file on her tablet. "Blackwood is scheduled to attend a classified briefing next week at the Pentagon. It's a meeting about upcoming SEAL operations, and I have reason to believe he's planning to sell that information to his foreign contacts. If we can document the betrayal in real time, we'll have evidence that can't be suppressed or explained away." Mitchell felt the weight of what she was proposing. "You're talking about running a surveillance operation on a flag officer in the Pentagon. That's not just dangerous, it's potentially career-ending for both of us." "My career ended 8 years ago when my team was murdered," Rebecca said quietly. "And if we don't stop Blackwood, more teams will die. The question is whether you're willing to risk your career to save lives." Mitchell looked at the evidence again, thinking about the SEAL teams under his command and the trust they placed in him to keep them safe. The idea that their missions might be compromised by someone in their own command structure was intolerable. "I'm in," he said, "but we do this right. We need backup, and we need to make sure the evidence reaches people who can't be compromised." Rebecca nodded. "I've been working on that. I have contacts in the FBI who specialize in military corruption cases. If we can present them with solid evidence, they can move forward with an investigation that bypasses naval intelligence entirely." They spent the next 2 hours planning their approach. Rebecca's years of intelligence work had prepared her for this moment, and Mitchell's operational experience provided the tactical expertise they needed. By the time they finished, They had a plan that was audacious, dangerous, and potentially the only way to bring Admiral Blackwood to justice. As they prepared to leave, Mitchell looked at Rebecca's tattoo one more time. "Why did you choose to document everything in ink?" Rebecca's expression grew solemn. "Because I knew I might not survive long enough to tell the story any other way. But I also knew that if I did survive, I'd carry my teammates with me until justice was done." Mitchell understood. The tattoo wasn't just evidence. It was a promise to the dead that their sacrifice wouldn't be forgotten. The next phase of their operation would require careful planning and precise execution. They agreed to meet again in 2 days to finalize their preparations. As they left the shooting range, both knew that they were crossing a line from which there would be no return. Over the following days, Rebecca and Mitchell worked separately to prepare for their operation. Rebecca used her intelligence contacts to gather additional information about Blackwood's schedule and security arrangements, while Mitchell quietly assessed which of his colleagues might be trusted with the truth about what they were planning. The weight of their conspiracy was enormous. They were preparing to expose a flag officer for treason, and the implications reached far beyond their personal safety. If they were wrong, their careers and possibly their lives would be destroyed. If they were right, the revelation would shake the foundations of naval intelligence. Rebecca found herself sleeping better than she had in years. After 8 years of carrying the burden alone, having someone who understood the stakes and was willing to help felt like a tremendous relief. She'd been prepared to die pursuing justice for her teammates, but now she had hope that she might actually live to see it done. Mitchell, meanwhile, struggled with the enormity of what they were planning. His entire career had been built on following orders and trusting the chain of command. Now, he was preparing to violate that trust based on the word of a woman who had been officially dead for 8 years. But the evidence was compelling, and his loyalty to the men under his command outweighed his institutional loyalty. When they met again, both had news that would complicate their mission. Rebecca had learned that Blackwood had accelerated his timeline and was planning to deliver sensitive information to his foreign contacts within the next 48 hours. Mitchell had discovered that 2 of his most trusted sergeants had been asking questions about recent operational security, suggesting that word of their investigation might be leaking. "We need to move faster than planned," Rebecca said. "If Blackwood suspects he's being investigated, he'll disappear into the intelligence community where we'll never find him again." Mitchell nodded grimly. "And if there's a leak in my unit, we may not have as much time as we thought." They modified their plan, accepting greater risks in exchange for the possibility of catching Blackwood in the act. The next 48 hours would determine whether 8 years of careful investigation would result in justice or disaster. As they prepared to execute their plan, both Rebecca and Mitchell understood that they were about to either vindicate the sacrifice of 12 dead soldiers or join them in death. The stakes couldn't be higher, and the margin for error was virtually non-existent. The operation began at dawn on a Tuesday morning. Rebecca had positioned herself in a rented office building across from the Pentagon, equipped with surveillance equipment that would allow her to monitor Blackwood's movements and communications. Mitchell was inside the Pentagon, using his legitimate access to observe the classified briefing while looking for signs of the betrayal Rebecca had predicted. The briefing room was filled with senior officers discussing upcoming operations in 3 different theaters. The information being shared was precisely the kind of intelligence that foreign governments would pay handsomely to obtain. As Mitchell watched Blackwood take notes and ask pointed questions about operational timelines, he felt sick knowing that this information might soon be in enemy hands. Through her surveillance equipment, Rebecca observed Blackwood leaving the Pentagon and traveling to a restaurant in downtown Washington. She followed at a distance, using techniques she'd learned during her intelligence training to remain undetected. When Blackwood sat down at a table with a man she recognized from intelligence files as a known foreign operative, Rebecca felt a surge of vindication mixed with terror. She activated her recording equipment and began documenting the meeting. Through a directional microphone, she captured Blackwood passing classified information to his contact in exchange for what appeared to be a substantial payment. The evidence was exactly what they needed, but getting it to the right people would require careful handling. Meanwhile, Mitchell had noticed unusual activity in the Pentagon's security protocols. It appeared that someone had flagged Rebecca's former identity for investigation, suggesting that their operation might have been compromised. He realized they were running out of time faster than they'd anticipated. When Blackwood and his contact concluded their meeting, Rebecca followed the foreign operative to confirm his identity and destination. Her surveillance revealed that he was heading directly to the Chinese embassy, confirming her suspicions about the ultimate destination of the leaked intelligence. As she prepared to extract herself from the surveillance location, Rebecca noticed she was being followed. 2 men in dark suits had been maintaining distance behind her for the past several blocks, and their behavior suggested professional training. She realized that Blackwood had anticipated the possibility of surveillance and had arranged for counter-surveillance of his own. Using evasive techniques that she hadn't employed in years, Rebecca managed to lose her pursuers and make her way to the prearranged meeting point where Mitchell was waiting. When she arrived, she found him tense and alert, clearly aware that their situation had become more dangerous. "We got it," she said, showing him the recording device. Blackwood passed classified information about 3 ongoing operations to a Chinese operative. The payment was substantial, and the intelligence will compromise active missions. Mitchell's expression was grim. "We've got problems. There's been unusual activity in Pentagon security, and I think someone knows we're investigating. We need to get this evidence to the FBI immediately." They drove to the FBI field office in Washington, where Rebecca's contact was waiting for them. Agent Sarah Walsh was a veteran investigator who specialized in military corruption cases, and she'd been briefed on the general nature of their evidence without knowing the specific details. When they presented their recordings and documentation, Agent Walsh's expression grew increasingly serious. The evidence was more comprehensive than she'd expected, and the implications were staggering. A flag officer selling classified information to foreign governments was a national security crisis of the highest order. "This is going to require immediate action," Walsh said. "We'll need to coordinate with military security to prevent Blackwood from destroying evidence or fleeing the country. How confident are you in the authenticity of this material?" Rebecca and Mitchell exchanged glances. "Completely confident," Rebecca said. "I've been building this case for 8 years, and today's surveillance confirms everything I suspected." Walsh nodded and began making phone calls to coordinate the arrest. Within hours, a joint FBI military security team would be moving to apprehend Admiral Blackwood and secure his files. The investigation that had begun with a chance encounter at a shooting range was about to culminate in one of the most significant espionage arrests in military history. As they waited for word on the arrest, Rebecca felt a mixture of relief and anxiety. After 8 years of living in the shadows, she was about to reclaim her identity and see justice done for her fallen teammates. But she also knew that the fallout from exposing Blackwood would be enormous, and there was no guarantee that she and Mitchell would survive the political consequences of their actions. The call came 3 hours later. Admiral Blackwood had been arrested at his home, and a search of his property had revealed extensive evidence of his treasonous activities. The FBI had also intercepted communications that confirmed the Chinese government's receipt of the classified information, providing additional proof of the security breach. "It's over," Agent Walsh said. "Blackwood is in custody, and the evidence is overwhelming. You've both done an incredible service to your country." Rebecca felt tears she hadn't allowed herself to shed in 8 years. The weight of carrying the truth alone, of living with the knowledge that her teammate's killer was walking free, finally lifted from her shoulders. Justice had been served, but the cost had been enormous. Mitchell reached over and squeezed her hand. "Your team can rest now," he said quietly. For the first time in 8 years, Lieutenant Sarah Chen, allowed herself to believe that she might actually have a future beyond revenge. The arrest of Admiral Blackwood sent shockwaves through the military and intelligence communities. As the full scope of his treasonous activities became public, investigations were launched into every operation he'd had access to over the past decade. The damage assessment revealed that dozens of missions had been compromised, and several American service members had died as a direct result of his betrayals. Rebecca found herself at the center of a media storm as news of her survival and 8-year investigation became public. The story of the intelligence officer who had faked her death to pursue justice for her fallen teammates captured the public imagination, and she became a reluctant hero. The Pentagon awarded her several commendations for her service, and she was offered her choice of assignments within naval intelligence. But the transition back to her official identity was difficult. Rebecca had become comfortable with her civilian life, and the thought of returning to military service brought back traumatic memories of the betrayal that had cost her teammates their lives. She found herself struggling with survivor's guilt and the psychological toll of 8 years spent in constant danger. Mitchell, meanwhile, faced his own challenges. His decision to help Rebecca had been vindicated by the results, but some of his colleagues questioned his methods and his willingness to work outside official channels. The military bureaucracy was uncomfortable with the precedent he'd set, even though his actions had prevented further American deaths. During the investigation that followed Blackwood's arrest, additional evidence emerged that painted an even more damning picture of his activities. He had been selling information to multiple foreign governments, and the financial records showed that he'd received millions of dollars in payments over the years. The scope of his betrayal was unprecedented in military history. The Chinese operative who had received the classified information was declared persona non grata and expelled from the country, but the damage had already been done. 3 ongoing operations had to be terminated because their security had been compromised, and several American assets in foreign countries had to be extracted to prevent their execution. Rebecca testified before multiple congressional committees about her investigation and the evidence she'd gathered. Her testimony was detailed and compelling, providing lawmakers with a comprehensive understanding of how the betrayal had occurred and what steps needed to be taken to prevent similar incidents in the future. During one particularly intense hearing, a senator asked Rebecca why she hadn't trusted official channels to handle her investigation. Her response was simple and devastating. Because Admiral Blackwood was the official channel. When the system is compromised from within, you have to work outside the system to fix it. The congressional hearings led to significant reforms in military intelligence oversight, with new protocols designed to prevent any individual from having the kind of unchecked access that had enabled Blackwood's treasonous activities. The changes were comprehensive and would affect how intelligence operations were conducted for years to come. As the legal proceedings against Blackwood moved forward, Rebecca was offered a position as a special advisor to the Pentagon on intelligence security. The role would allow her to help implement the reforms that had emerged from her investigation, while also providing her with a way to honor the memory of her fallen teammates. Mitchell received a promotion and was assigned to lead a new unit focused on operational security. His experience with the Blackwood case had given him unique insights into the vulnerabilities that existed within the military intelligence structure, and his superiors wanted him to help address those weaknesses. The friendship that had developed between Rebecca and Mitchell during their investigation continued to grow stronger. They had shared an experience that few people could understand, and their mutual respect had evolved into something deeper. Both had sacrificed significant portions of their lives to serve their country, and they found comfort in each other's company. 6 months after Blackwood's arrest, Rebecca stood in Arlington National Cemetery at the graves of her 12 fallen teammates. She had finally been able to tell their families the truth about how they died, and several of them had traveled to Washington to attend the ceremony where she was officially welcomed back to life. As she placed flowers on each grave, Rebecca spoke quietly to her former teammates, telling them that justice had finally been served. The tattoo on her arm, which had been her constant companion for 8 years, no longer felt like a burden. It had become a memorial to their sacrifice and a testament to the power of persistence in the face of impossible odds. Mitchell stood beside her, understanding that this moment represented the end of one chapter of her life and the beginning of another. The woman who had been Rebecca Martinez, dental hygienist, was finally at peace with becoming Lieutenant Sarah Chen again. The legal proceedings against Admiral Blackwood concluded with his conviction on multiple charges of treason, espionage, and conspiracy against the United States. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole, a fitting end to a career that had been built on betrayal and greed. The judge's closing remarks emphasized the severity of his crimes and the courage of those who had worked to expose him. Rebecca attended the sentencing hearing, sitting in the gallery as the man who had destroyed her life and killed her teammates was finally held accountable for his actions. When the judge read the verdict, she felt a sense of closure that she hadn't experienced in 8 years. The chapter of her life dedicated to seeking justice was finally complete. In the months that followed, Rebecca threw herself into her new role as a special advisor on intelligence security. She worked with congressional committees, Pentagon officials, and intelligence agencies to implement reforms that would prevent another Admiral Blackwood from betraying American service members. Her unique perspective as someone who had lived through the consequences of such betrayal made her an invaluable resource in these efforts. The reforms she helped develop included new oversight mechanisms, enhanced background checks for personnel with access to classified information, and improved protocols for reporting suspicious activities. The changes were comprehensive and represented the most significant overhaul of military intelligence security in decades. Mitchell's new unit focused on training military personnel to identify and respond to potential security threats within their own ranks. His experience with the Blackwood case had taught him that the greatest threats often came from within, and his training programs emphasized the importance of vigilance and accountability at all levels of the military hierarchy. The relationship between Rebecca and Mitchell continued to evolve, with both finding in each other a partner who understood the unique challenges of military service and the personal costs of dedication to duty. Their shared experience had created a bond that was both professional and personal, and they supported each other through the difficult transition from their covert investigation to their new official roles. A year after Blackwood's arrest, Rebecca was invited to speak at the Naval Academy about her experience and the lessons it held for future naval officers. Standing before an audience of young men and women who would soon be leading American sailors and Marines, she emphasized the importance of integrity, loyalty, and the courage to do what was right even when it was dangerous. The oath you will take as officers includes a promise to defend the Constitution against all enemies, foreign and domestic, she told the midshipmen. Sometimes the most dangerous enemies are those who wear the same uniform you do. Your duty is not just to follow orders, but to ensure that those orders are worthy of the trust placed in you by the men and women under your command. The speech was well received, and Rebecca found herself in demand as a speaker at military academies and training facilities across the country. Her story became a case study in military ethics courses, and her experience was used to illustrate the importance of moral courage in the face of institutional pressure. Mitchell often accompanied her to these speaking engagements, providing his perspective on the operational aspects of their investigation. Together, they presented a compelling case for the importance of ethical leadership and the dangers of unchecked authority within military organizations. Their presentations were particularly effective because they could speak from personal experience about the consequences of betrayal at the highest levels of command. The midshipmen and junior officers who heard their story understood that the principles they were learning weren't just theoretical concepts, but practical guidelines that could mean the difference between life and death for the people under their command. As their professional partnership deepened, Rebecca and Mitchell began to explore the possibility of a personal relationship. Both had sacrificed romantic relationships for their military careers, and both understood the unique challenges that came with loving someone who was dedicated to serving their country. Their courtship was careful and deliberate, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared values. The media attention surrounding their story gradually faded, allowing them to focus on their work without the constant scrutiny that had followed Blackwood's arrest. Rebecca found that she enjoyed her advisory role more than she had expected, and the opportunity to help shape policy gave her a sense of purpose that had been missing during her years in hiding. Mitchell's security training programs were proving highly effective, with several potential security breaches being identified and addressed before they could cause damage. His emphasis on creating a culture of accountability and transparency was changing how military units approached internal security, and his methods were being adopted by other branches of the armed forces. 2 years after their first meeting at the shooting range, Rebecca and Mitchell were married in a small ceremony attended by fellow service members and the families of Rebecca's fallen teammates. The ceremony was held at the Naval Academy Chapel, and Rebecca wore her dress uniform for the first time since her official return to life. The tattoo on her arm was visible beneath her short sleeves, a reminder of the journey that had brought them together. During the reception, several of Mitchell's SEAL teammates spoke about the courage it had taken for him to risk his career to help Rebecca expose the truth. Rebecca's former intelligence colleagues praised her dedication and persistence in pursuing justice, despite the personal cost. The celebration was both a wedding and a recognition of their service to their country. Their honeymoon was brief, as both had commitments that required their attention. Rebecca was working on a comprehensive report about intelligence security that would be presented to the Secretary of Defense, while Mitchell was preparing for a deployment to train Allied forces in counterintelligence techniques. They had both chosen careers that would require sacrifices, but they were confident that their relationship could withstand the challenges. The report Rebecca prepared became a landmark document in military intelligence circles, providing detailed recommendations for preventing insider threats and improving oversight of personnel with access to classified information. The recommendations were adopted as policy across all branches of the military, and Rebecca's work was credited with significantly enhancing national security. Mitchell's deployment was successful, with Allied forces reporting improved ability to identify and counter intelligence threats. His training methods were particularly effective in helping foreign military personnel understand the importance of internal security and the techniques needed to protect classified information from compromise. When Mitchell returned from deployment, he found Rebecca deeply involved in a new project, establishing a memorial foundation for military personnel who had died as a result of intelligence betrayals. The foundation would provide support for the families of fallen service members and fund research into improving military security protocols. The Foundation's first major initiative was the creation of a memorial garden at Arlington National Cemetery, specifically dedicated to service members who had died as a result of intelligence failures or betrayals. The garden would include the names of Rebecca's 12 teammates, along with other service members who had lost their lives to similar betrayals. The Memorial Garden project received widespread support from military families, veterans organizations, and congressional leaders. The design incorporated elements that honored the sacrifice of those who had died, while also serving as a reminder of the importance of maintaining security and integrity within military organizations. Rebecca threw herself into the foundation work with the same intensity she had brought to her investigation of Admiral Blackwood. She worked with architects, landscape designers, and military historians to create a memorial that would serve both as a place of remembrance and as an educational tool for future generations of military personnel. Mitchell supported the foundation while continuing his security training work, which had expanded to include civilian government agencies and defense contractors. His expertise in identifying and preventing insider threats was in high demand, and he found himself consulting with organizations across the federal government. The couple's professional success was matched by their personal happiness. They had found in each other partners who understood the demands of military service and the importance of the work they were doing. Their relationship was built on a foundation of shared values and mutual respect that had been forged in the crucible of their dangerous investigation. 3 years after their wedding, Rebecca was promoted to the rank of commander and given expanded responsibilities for military intelligence security. Her work had been instrumental in preventing several potential security breaches, and her reputation within the intelligence community was stellar. The woman who had once been presumed dead had become one of the most influential voices in military security policy. Mitchell was promoted to the rank of captain and assigned to lead a new joint task force focused on counterintelligence operations. His unit would work with all branches of the military to identify and eliminate threats to operational security, drawing on the lessons learned from the Blackwood case and other security failures. The memorial garden was completed and dedicated in a ceremony attended by hundreds of military families and senior officials. Rebecca delivered the keynote address, speaking about the importance of remembering those who had died and the responsibility of the living to ensure that their sacrifices were not forgotten. As she spoke, Rebecca's hand unconsciously moved to her tattoo, which had become a symbol of her journey from presumed death to vindication. The names and dates etched in ink on her skin represented not just her fallen teammates, but all service members who had died as a result of betrayal and negligence. The memorial garden became a place of pilgrimage for military families and a powerful reminder of the human cost of security failures. The educational component of the memorial helped visitors understand the importance of maintaining security protocols and the devastating consequences that could result from their failure. Rebecca and Mitchell's story became part of military leadership training, used to illustrate the importance of moral courage and the responsibility of leaders to protect those under their command. Their example inspired a new generation of military officers to take security seriously and to have the courage to speak up when they saw something wrong. As they approached their fifth wedding anniversary, Rebecca and Mitchell reflected on the journey that had brought them together. What had begun as a chance encounter at a shooting range had evolved into a partnership that had changed both their lives and improved the security of American military operations around the world. The woman who had once lived in hiding as Rebecca Martinez, dental hygienist, had found her way back to her true identity and discovered love in the process. The man who had been willing to risk his career to help a stranger had found a partner who shared his commitment to service and integrity. Their story was far from over, but they had already achieved more than either had thought possible when they first met at the shooting range. They had exposed a traitor, saved lives, and built a life together based on shared values and mutual respect. The tattoo on Rebecca's arm would always be a reminder of the 12 teammates who had died and the 8 years she had spent seeking justice for them. But it was also a symbol of resilience, determination, and the power of truth to ultimately prevail over corruption and betrayal. As they continued their work in military security and intelligence, Rebecca and Mitchell knew that their greatest achievement was not the reforms they had helped implement or the recognition they had received, but the knowledge that they had honored the memory of those who had died and helped prevent others from suffering the same fate. Their love story had been born from tragedy and forged in danger, but it had become something beautiful and enduring. They had found in each other not just romantic partners, but true companions in the important work of protecting those who served their country. The shooting range where they had first met remained a regular destination for both of them, a place where they could practice their skills and remember the moment when their lives had intersected. The quiet woman in the worn baseball cap and the SEAL commander who had noticed her tattoo had become partners in every sense of the word. Their story would continue to inspire others long after they had retired from active service, a testament to the power of courage, integrity, and love to overcome even the most daunting obstacles. The simple woman at the range had indeed been much more than she appeared, and the SEAL commander who had seen her tattoo had made the right choice in pursuing the truth it represented. In the end, justice had been served, love had been found, and the memory of 12 fallen heroes had been honored. The tattoo that had once been a burden had become a badge of honor, and the woman who had worn it had found her way home at last. Years later, when Rebecca and Mitchell were asked to speak about their experience, they would emphasize that their story was not just about exposing a traitor or solving a mystery, but about the importance of never giving up on the truth, no matter how difficult the path to justice might be. Their legacy would be measured not just in the reforms they had helped implement, but in the lives they had saved and the principles they had upheld. The simple woman at the range had indeed been extraordinary, and the SEAL commander who had recognized her worth had proven himself worthy of her trust. Together, they had shown that love and justice could triumph over betrayal and corruption, and that the truth, however long buried, would ultimately prevail. Their story became a beacon of hope for others who faced seemingly impossible odds in their pursuit of justice. It demonstrated that ordinary people could accomplish extraordinary things when they were willing to sacrifice everything for what they believed was right. The tattoo that had started it all remained on Rebecca's arm, a permanent reminder of the journey that had brought her from the depths of despair to the heights of love and vindication. It was a symbol of the power of memory, the importance of loyalty, and the ultimate triumph of truth over deception. Rebecca Martinez, the dental hygienist who had never existed, had given way to Commander Sarah Chen, the intelligence officer who had refused to let her teammates' deaths go unavenged. The transformation was complete, but the lessons learned during those 8 years of hiding would stay with her forever. The shooting range continued to be a place of peace and reflection for both Rebecca and Mitchell, a reminder of the day when their lives had changed forever. The woman who had seemed so ordinary had proven to be extraordinary, and the man who had been willing to listen to her story had shown the courage necessary to help her tell it. Their partnership had saved lives, exposed corruption, and created lasting reforms that would protect future generations of service members. But most importantly, it had shown that love could grow from the most unlikely circumstances, and that two people united by common purpose could overcome any obstacle. The tattoo that had once been a secret burden had become a proud symbol of survival and justice. The woman who had worn it had found her way home, and the man who had recognized its significance had found his perfect partner. Together, they had written a story that would inspire others for generations to come. Their final chapter was still being written, but the foundation they had built together was strong enough to withstand any challenge. They had proven that integrity, Courage and love were more powerful than corruption, fear, and hatred. Their story would endure as a testament to the triumph of good over evil and the power of two people who refused to give up on justice. The simple woman at the range had indeed been much more than she appeared, and her story had become one of the most inspiring examples of courage and determination in military history. The SEAL commander who had seen her tattoo had made the right choice in pursuing the truth, and together they had created something beautiful from the ashes of tragedy. Their legacy would live on in the lives they had saved, the reforms they had implemented, and the love they had shared. The tattoo that had brought them together would always be a reminder of the journey that had transformed them both, and the shooting range where they had met would remain a sacred place in their shared history. Rebecca Chen and James Mitchell had found each other against all odds, and their love story had become a beacon of hope for anyone who believed in the power of truth and the importance of never giving up on justice. Their simple beginning at a shooting range had led to extraordinary consequences, proving that the most important encounters in life often happen when we least expect them. The woman with the tattoo and the man who understood its significance had created a legacy that would endure long after they were gone, a testament to the power of love, courage, and unwavering commitment to doing what was right, no matter the cost.